Constitutional Court will deliver judgment on the legal challenge to the Electoral Amendment Act tomorrow. The city of Johannesburg says it will have no mercy for errant road users and criminals over the festive season. A very good afternoon. We're coming to you live from our studios here in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Thank you very much for tuning in. You're watching The Week Ahead. You can interact with us on social media platforms. It's at Week Ahead. Our hashtag is The Week Ahead. I'm your host, Mfundo Mabala. Violence against women and children is in the spotlight again, with the 16 days of activism for no violence against women and children campaign underway globally. But women and children are suffering at the hands of perpetrators daily, as heard during an imbiz on the issue of the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro.
Desperate voices spoke up, expressing a feeling of hopelessness. Many say they long to feel safe. The police were on hand to hear them. Those attending were hoping for more people to join them and speak out. They want to be united in the fight against the scourge of violence against women and children.
The family as a community, we need to stand together because violence, the crime rate is high. And for people not coming out and speaking about it, it's scary. We are raising children and we need to teach because it starts at home, it starts in your household.
So I cannot paint a picture of that this is what we are doing. To be honest with you, we need to start by unifying stakeholders in the community so that we can deal with the issue of GBV in our area. Otherwise, GBV is a big problem in our area.
The Gamesh area, where the imbizo was held, recorded a decrease in crime during the previous reporting period. But the police want to make a further dent in crime, including gender-based violence.
We're expecting to be given the marching orders because crime is real and crime is bad and our people suffer from crime. And there's so much expectation from the police, and where we do well, one will expect also to be told that there are areas where we're doing well. Where we're not doing well, they will also tell us. But we are also here to share with them and what we are doing, what we have been doing, what we plan to do as well.
Gender-based violence also has a secondary effect on children. The Department of Education has found that the academic performance of learners is negatively affected when they grow up in an environment where GBV is present.
We do find challenges within our learners. Learners are traumatized, learners cannot concentrate. That in itself, it's a big problem. And you cannot learn in an environment where there is always violence.
We are so fortunate that today it's all the different NGOs, civil society, and many other CBOs that are form an integral part of this process. Killings and in the Kariga area, Jutnik area is a sickening situation as it is at the moment.
Police in the metro have also included a focused GBV plan as part of their Safer Festive Season campaign. Nandi Pablaki, SABC News, Kariga.
The Constitutional Court will deliver judgment on the legal challenge to the Electoral Amendment Act tomorrow. That's Monday, the 4th of December. The case by the Independent Candidates Association of South Africa, as well as One SA Movement, is challenging the constitutionality of the Act and was heard late in August. To speak more on the matter, we're joined now by Lawson Naidoo. He's Executive Secretary of the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution, or CASAC, as many would know it. Mr. Naidoo, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much.
No, it's a pleasure to have you with us. So tomorrow, that particular matter of the electoral participation of independents will be brought to finality. Just your views on this whole process, from that landmark Concord judgment to the signing of the bill, and then now applicants going back to court to say, hang on, this bill in its current form does not give expression to that which was envisaged by the Apex Court when it said, let independents participate.
Indeed, it's been a long road since that judgment of the Constitutional Court in the New Nation Movement case in June of 2020. It's 3.5 years since then. Parliament was initially given 2 years to amend the Electoral Act to provide for the participation of independent candidates in national and provincial elections. There was a convoluted process in Parliament. It required a couple of extensions before the Act was finally passed by Parliament and then assented to by the President in April of this year. And what has been clear all along, in that inasmuch as the Constitutional Court said that in terms of Section 19 of the Constitution, that independent candidates have the right to contest these elections, the court left it up to Parliament to design the system that would provide for independent candidates. And unfortunately, what both the Minister of Home Affairs and Parliament have opted for is what has been called the minimalist option, which is simply a tweaking of the current electoral system that we have to try and accommodate independent candidates. And it is, I think, but the proof of the inappropriateness of that is in the current Constitutional Court challenge, for which we will get judgment tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Because it seems quite clear that the only reasonable way of being able to fairly accommodate independent candidates is through some sort of constituency system. And the tweaking of the current PR list system as we have at the moment has given rise to these anomalies that have been the subject of this Constitutional Court challenge. Mm-hmm.
But now those independent candidates are saying at the very least, this tweaking can still be stretched a bit more and say just lower the threshold. Currently, the threshold does exclude a number of them. But there's an argument on the other side that lowering the threshold would merely mean that you've got a number of the independent candidates vying for these positions. But really, once they get them, it really amounts to nothing. Your views on just that, where they say lower the threshold, nevertheless, allow for many of us to participate?
Yeah, I mean, the first argument from the One South Africa movement is that that threshold for being able to participate in the elections for independent candidates, as well as, I must add, for parties that are currently not represented in either the National Assembly or in any of the provincial legislatures, is set at 15% of what is called the quota that was required to secure a seat in that ballot in the last election. So 15% of the votes, effectively, that were required to win a seat. And that at a level of a provincial legislature could be anything between 4,000 and 9,000 signatures. And for a place on the ballot for the National Assembly, somewhere between 10 and 14,000 signatures. Mm. So, these are rather high figures, and independent candidates, I think have quite rightly said that it is a significant barrier to entry. It's an onerous responsibility that is placed on them. It would require huge resources to go out and be able to secure these signatures, and that figure should be lower. Mm-hmm. And the fact is, the line's got to be drawn somewhere, and the parties have asked that the line be drawn at 1,000 signatures, mm-hmm. which is much lower. But it's got to be balanced against having a ballot paper that is not too long and really accommodate serious contestants in that election. So it is a fine balance, and the court, that's the one issue that the court's going to have to pronounce upon tomorrow.
How significant is this judgment now yet again? Because one would think it's another test of our constitutional democracy, because what really now they're looking for, after Parliament went on to do what was asked of them, they're now asking for the court to be more prescriptive, that roll your sleeves and lower that 14,000, because really Parliament did comply, one would say, but they felt they merely ticked the boxes. So now they're actually seeking the court to be more prescriptive and direct and tell them exactly how you're going to measure this, and this will become the threshold. How significant is just that type of a judgment?
Well, I think you've honed in on a critical issue here, because it is the responsibility of Parliament to design the electoral system, not that of the courts. So the court, in its judgment, is really going to have to focus on whether any of the challenges that have been brought, deal directly with the constitutionality of the bill, not on the specifics of whether the number should be 15% or 20% or 5%, because that's a call for Parliament. But for the court to say that what Parliament has done has the effect of offending against fundamental constitutional principles of fairness, of reasonableness, of rationality. And that's the narrow focus that the court has to play, because ultimately this is the responsibility of Parliament. Parliament has decided, and they've argued strongly, both Parliament and the Minister have argued strongly that there was considerable debate on this issue. They've lowered it from what was, I think initially a 20% threshold to 15%, and they say this is now reasonable. And whether that's sufficient to persuade the court, we'll find out tomorrow.
It's most certainly a very tough balancing act to make sure that they don't overreach into that which is the function of the legislature. So it most certainly will be very interesting for all of us. But how important is the timing of this ruling, given that the Electoral Commission had appealed for a court order a bit earlier, even as far back as September, just for their own administrative processes?
Indeed. I mean, it's looming in, next year. The IEC requires as much time as by the end of September. We're 2 months further down the line. So it is going to put strain on the IEC, but one assumes that, many of their backroom systems have been put in place, and they may require some tweaking depending on the outcome of tomorrow's judgment.
Mr. Naidu, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Most certainly probably touch base with you post that particular judgment. That's Lawson Naidu, Executive Secretary of the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution. More news on the other side. Stay with us. Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, the city of Johannesburg says it will have no mercy for errant road users as well as criminals over the festive season. It says comprehensive measures are in place to ensure road compliance.
A major drive against crime this festive season and a focus on road compliance. There will be no reprieve for those breaking the law.
We are going to be focusing on 3 layers of the tribe band. We call it, the tribe band. Number 1 is a traffic safety management and enforcement. Number 2 is the bylaw enforcement. Number 3 is the crime prevention and crime combating and prevention. So on the traffic management and enforcement, we are number 1. If you're gonna drink and drive, if you're gonna drink, don't drive, because you're gonna be arrested. There are roadblocks which have been set up all over the city. So be careful, because you're going to sleep in jail. And then also people, because they're going to be traveling away, they must ensure that their papers are proper. You don't have an expired license or an expired, the disc for the car. So they must ensure that those are renewed, right? And then also just ensure that the car is in good condition, it does not leak oil, and all your indicators are working properly, because the JMPD has been mandated to check all of those.
The JMPD says it's bad already, and advanced technological equipment is informing their plan.
The first bus that we went to, it's called the ANPR. It's automatic number plate recognition bus. So it specializes in detecting stolen vehicles, cloned vehicles, false plates, unlicensed and registered motor vehicles, and infringement notices in general. The roadworthy that it's done at the licensing department. Now we're bringing it on in a mobile format onto the roadside check to say we can do roadworthiness at any point. We can just put the truck at any place on the freeway
on any side of the street and just through the roadworthiness of the vehicles.
Crime prevention units will be deployed in various hotspots.
And there are going to be a lot of operations, the drug busts, the gang-related, crimes. We're going to be dealing with those and all of that. So we are going to be identifying all the houses or the people of interest, and we arrest them.
Club and tavern owners in suburban areas and townships are also urged to ensure compliance with the municipal bylaws. Kilebogile Butlholo, SABC News, Johannesburg.
We shift our focus to this story now. Free State Tourism says the province's tourism menu has plenty to offer visitors this festive season. One of its offerings is the Zenchita Rehabilitation Centre, situated just outside Bloemfontein. The wildlife sanctuary is a perfect getaway for the young and old, with beautiful scenery and a real wildlife experience.
Zenchita is situated 22 kilometers outside Bloemfontein. It's a permanent home for more than 80 animal species. It's a non-profit center which was established in 2007, where animals' rights are being protected. It has so far attracted more than 10,000 visitors.
Well, it started about 16 years ago with 2 female caracals, baby caracals, that were shot dead by farmers. The owner took them in, she bottle raised them, and she bought this farm for the 2 caracals. And after that, her love for the animals just grew bigger and bigger. Today, we are a wildlife rescue centre for wildlife in need, with over 80 different species in our care, 110 plus animals that we feed on a daily basis, thanks to the 2 female caracals.
Summer and the holiday season are great for business. The wildlife includes lions, cheetahs, horses, and a variety of birds, among others. There's also a braai area and picnic. For those who want to spend the night, luxurious accommodation is also available.
Well, to take care of these animals, we need to generate an income. For us to generate an income, we are open to the public 7 days a week, so people can come and view these beautiful animals. And not only will they keep themselves and the kids and the family entertained, they get educational tours as well, where they can learn about the wildlife and why we need to take care of them, because in 20 years' time now, you're only going to see a lion on a photo.
The place is also accommodating for people with disabilities. Aphumelele Mdlalane, SABC News, Bloemfontein.
Hostel dwellers organisation Ubunye Bamahostela has threatened to take matters into their own hands as crime levels rise in the Durban city centre. Police say they've received many reports from motorists of hijacking and robberies of their possessions, such as cell phones and handbags, at gunpoint. Despite police intervention, the situation has worsened.
Durban's Moore Road interchange, one of the city's most dangerous intersections for the general public. This is where groups of homeless and vagrants roam freely, using underground tunnels as hideout spots after attacking their victims. They target unsuspecting motorists and pedestrians, robbing them of their valuables at gunpoint. Smash and grab incidents have increased. Pedestrians and motorists have raised the alarm, complaining that it's a nightmare to pass this area.
He needs to get law enforcement. He needs to, clean up this area. It's crazy. The amount of women that you hear getting hijacked, breaking the windows. It's just scary being a woman.
Very badly. Especially in the morning, at night, when it's going to be bedtime, dark. Hey, they're very busy here.
It's very bad according to the Hunga guys. They are robbing everybody and stealing everything.
Ubunye Bamahostela says as government continues to pay lip service to the safety and security of its citizens, they've now taken to the streets to assist in the fight against crime.
SABC and Metro, they are failing to control this situation because every day, each day, more than 5 cars are stolen and smashed. But cases are open every day, but they don't take any serious action.
The area has troubled police for years.
Police have also been issuing several warnings to motorists and residents to be cautious when commuting on roads under the bridges. The issue of vagrants making a home for themselves in and around the city is beyond policing. The authorities, working together with the police and relevant government departments, need to seek lasting solutions that will eradicate the problem. Homeless people who are roaming the streets without any employment or activity which they are involved in become easy targets for criminal syndicates to recruit them into committing crime.
Police say they will still monitor the area, but have called for partners to improve the situation. Vusi Khumalo, SABC News, Durban.
Now, the 5th of December marks 10 years since the passing of Nelson Mandela, and in creating a space to acknowledge and process this grief, the Nelson Mandela Foundation is commemorating his death with an exhibition titled Mandela is Dead. The exhibition reflects the first decade without Madiba and is in collaboration with Forge and Stellenbosch University at the Nelson Mandela Centre of Memory in Houghton, Johannesburg. Now, joining us for more on this is Neo Mogopa, curator of this particular exhibition. Neo, good afternoon and thank you very much for your time.
Good afternoon and thanks for having me.
No, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Now, let's start with the title of the exhibition before we get to everything else. Nelson Mandela is Dead. That title almost reminds me of the play Sizwe Banzi is Dead or German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche's statement, God is dead. No euphemism, Mandela has passed on or he has left it. It's almost like it's forcing one to confront the brutal reality of the end of an era where such an individual existed. Unpack this title for us.
Absolutely. I think you've really referenced the thought process quite well there. And it really is about, what is it now? I think every year around this time, but I think really when anything happens in the country, we get questions such as, what would Nelson Mandela say? What would he do? What would he think? Would things be like this if he was still around? And of course, we can't know the answers to those kinds of questions, but what they really kind of reflect on is a kind of grief, a kind of pining or hope that Nelson Mandela could come back in some shape or form. Maybe his values could have action in our lives and he would save us again. But the reality is that nobody is coming to save us. And so through this exhibition, we're trying to really articulate how high the stakes are and how urgent the situation we are in as a country.
So, what is being exhibited? Is it Mandela's life or, like you say, that which has happened throughout the 10 years that he has left us?
So what's exhibited is actually quite an interesting and self-introspective environment that's been created. Of course, it exists at the Nelson Mandela Centre of Memory that houses the permanent exhibition on the life and times of Nelson Mandela in one of the wings. And so that was always open, especially during the launch as well. And this exhibition is on a separate wing, and it explores portraits of Nelson Mandela that have etched onto perspex, so like a plexiglass material that is both transparent, but also you can see the scratches of his face. And so he's there, but he's not there. And when someone is standing behind the portrait, you see them placed in the frame of Nelson Mandela. Some of the other aspects of the exhibition include what we're calling the Library of Untold Freedom, that invites viewers to whisper their most audacious, most excessive, most unbridled, most excessive vision of what freedom could look like in this country for themselves and for the people around them. And then the final piece of the exhibition includes what we're calling an artistic ritual, I'm going to say, a communal participatory moment that we're calling Please Take This, It's Falling. And it invites guests to take a fistful of salt, let it represent something, whether it is grief that Nelson Mandela is not here and the country is the way that it is, whether it's your personal story or even your commitment to participating meaningfully in building this country. You take that fistful of salt and you pass it to the left, and over time we would have all collectively moved this entire tower of salt from the right to the left. And so it really is a participatory exhibition, lots of moments of self-reflection and kind of self-questioning, but also all of it within the context of the things that Nelson Mandela represented and symbolized.
My goodness, Neo, this sounds so beautiful. What a creative you are. So you guys launched, honestly, it sounds so beautiful. Everyone would possibly want to experience from just what you described. You launched on the 30th of November. How do people get there? Is there a fee that is charged, or can you just give us all the details pertaining to that?
Sure. So it is open to the public. There's no fee. It's open from at 107 Central Street in Houghton Estate, which is where the Nelson Mandela Foundation is housed. And it's available for viewing from Monday to Friday between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m., as well as on Saturdays between, I think, 9 and 2 p.m.
Neo, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. I'll certainly be the first one there tomorrow. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. What a beautiful way to commemorate the life of Nelson Mandela. That's Neo Mogopa, curator of that beautiful, exceptional exhibition. To this story now, the African National Congress is convening a political education workshop that will adopt a political education campaign to train all ANC members and leaders as part of the renewal project adopted by the 55th National Conference. Let's listen live at that particular event.
50-50. It says at least 50% must be women. It's a big distinction, it's not the same. Number two, a question of non-racial character, ANC, we must not be symbolic about it. We must be conscious about it. If I have biasness towards the working class, doesn't say we're a working class movement, but we must be biased towards the working class because the working class constitute the majority in society. Okay, it constitutes the majority in society, is the most exploited and oppressed section of our society. The movement must be biased towards them. I'm not sure if we can proudly boast about that. Sometimes influence of the bourgeoisie is very, very big on us. So we have a responsibility that it is injustice for any cadre of the movement to believe that beyond him or her, there's no life. In veterans, there is no. In veterans, there's monitor game now. When a veteran stand up in public and say, ANC has betrayed society, it's not a small statement, it's a big statement. It has the ANC more than what the opposition parties put together do. And therefore, our veterans must appreciate that they have a younger generation coming that they must guard and guide. They can't have Veterans League being reckless. Can't be allowed. Veterans League must guide. It must appreciate that change is painful. Change is always associated with loss, and people hate it. And therefore, it is them who must guide us through that change. Let me move towards the last and say, our position on the Ukrainian-Russian war was a correct position. And everybody is beginning to accept that it was a correct position. There's no honor in death. There's no honor in the grave. It is peace that can help us develop and go past the situation. But what we should never allow us to do, pressure to condemn Russia and live in NATO out of the hook, because Ukraine is in a proxy war. It is NATO that posed that war. Our position on the Israel-Palestinian conflict is correct. It is beginning to show, and we must work on it and actually be bold about it. We have an outside chance of making some gains in certain areas and communities that never trusted us before. But it's not going to be luck. It will depend on the work we do. In conclusion, let's remind ourselves that the biggest resource this movement is having over everybody is its people. That is the biggest resource we have as the ANC, is its people armed with political and ideological clarity. If we have a big army with no ideological clarity, no political clarity, then we are in trouble. Wameni, when somebody hold a campaign somewhere, I've seen many of them, and they make a big noise, whether they're in one place or in 10 places, because we're many. But we must be armed with ideological and political clarity. Let us go out there and work for decisive victory in 2024. I don't want 50 plus. I think we must win decisively. The ANC has that right. Thank you very much. You see, Comrade Makor, I prepared these notes, having not been here. So if I say something that doesn't link up with what was discussed here, you have forgiven me for that. Thank you very much.
All right, live visuals there from the ANC's political education workshop. National Chair Gwede Mantashe just leaving the podium. You would have heard him there stating that they don't want 50+1. They want a decisive victory, and also going on to state that their position on the Russia-Ukraine conflict was the correct one. More news on the other side of this break. Do stay with us. Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, the business sector believes major strides have been made in addressing the country's electricity supply constraints, with estimates being made that load shedding will slow drastically during 2024. But as we go into the new year, concerns remain around South Africa's logistical challenges, its continued lack of economic growth and fiscal constraints, especially as the country heads into a national election, with government spending trends in the year likely to come under scrutiny. These are some of the issues discussed at the GIBS South African Economic Foresight 2024 panel discussion earlier this week. SABC's Nompumelelo Ziziba filed this report.
The Gordon Institute of Business Science gathered experts from business, industry and economists to reflect on the year that was and to look forward to 2024. At a global level, it's anticipated that the world's major economy, the United States, would experience a soft landing. That is, it's not likely to go into a recession going into 2024. And in other good news, the feeling is that global inflation, including here at home, is likely to trend downwards.
Inflation should, by the end of next year, be back at 4.5%.
Okay.
Why I don't say that with huge amounts of conviction is that that's also what we thought last year, right? But then load shedding created more inflation. The oil price came out and surprised us.
Schoeman predicted that the Reserve Bank would only likely start reducing rates towards the end of next year. Meanwhile, business said it had joined hands with government to help dent some of the country's structural problems, focusing on key issues like energy, logistics, as well as crime and corruption, noting that the private sector, through various business bodies, had provided millions of rand to capacitate key institutions like the National Energy Crisis Committee, the National Logistics Crisis Committee, as well as the National Prosecuting Authority to effectively do their work. Meanwhile, business has expressed concerns about country-specific risks.
It's precipitated by geopolitics, it's precipitated by social instability, it's precipitated by the political risk that is going up and the country risk that is going up along with it. It is precipitated by the 2024 elections. Gina has spoken to it. The coalitions. City of Joburg has had 8 mayors in the last 2 years. If
That's
the
quite a
city
few.
of Joburg, 8 mayors in the last 2 years. So if what is happening at the city of Joburg is going to be escalating to national next year, then we're going to be sitting with a new president every month. I don't know what that looks like. Obviously, I'm exaggerating.
As the country looks to radically reform to improve its economic fortunes, DHL, which has a footprint across sub-Saharan Africa, pointed to several countries that South Africa could try to emulate when it comes to being more amenable to investment and the job creation that would come with it.
I think Botswana, our neighbour, if you look at how they've done, if you look at how they're faring on the democracy index, for example, they're far better than South Africa. If you look at their stock exchange, now it's performed versus ours, they've done better. So I think, there's some examples we can learn from that. I think we can learn from Mauritius in terms of how they're trying to position themselves from a macroeconomic point of view. They're trying to position themselves as a mini Singapore of Africa, also doing better on both the democracy index as well as the corruption index, certainly doing better than us. I think a breath of fresh air for me right now is the Kenyan government. I think that the Kenyan government has become very receptive to the voice of business.
There was agreement among the panelists that South Africa's participation in international fora like BRICS was positive, given the potential economic spin-offs. But concerns were raised around how South Africa chooses to position itself, particularly on geopolitical tensions, especially given that a significant portion of the country's trade and investment lies with the West.
But why weigh in on global conflict?
Yeah.
Why do you have to be so vocal on wars? I mean, what is there to gain other than people worried that you're
cozying up to someone and really trying to make your small s a bit bigger on the bricks. So that's the problem with the country risk premium, and then it weighs on FX, and FX comes with commodity prices, oil prices, it becomes inflationary.
And then you've got imported.
Despite the challenges, there was a feeling that really good progress had been made, particularly on the energy front, even as the country continues to experience high levels of load shedding right now.
The single most important intervention by President Ramaphosa in the midst of all these crises is when he opened up the energy sector. Okay, he needs to open it up further. There's the ERA that's serving before various parliamentary committees at the moment. I think that will change our world dramatically. But opening it up has allowed us to generate another 4,800 megawatts. So if you're looking at tangible successes, I know that when you're sitting in stage 6, you know, well, where is this? But the fact remains almost 5,000 megawatts, and there's more coming.
On national health insurance, Nicolau argued that the proposed system as currently framed would worsen the plight of the poor, adding that a vision of the NHI where the public sector and the private sector more closely work together would be a better solution. On the two-pot retirement system, Gina Skuma noted that if introduced in 2024, pension fund members' ability to tap into their savings could boost the economy in the short term as consumer spending rose, but warned that in the medium to long term, the vast majority of South Africans would still find it difficult to retire comfortably if they'd taken to raiding the savings portion of their pension too often. Nompumelelo Siziba, SABC News, Johannesburg.
All right, let's now take you live to Bloemfontein with the SACP's briefing the media. That briefing follows the party's Central Committee plenary.
A person who becomes aware of an alleged corruption activity cannot refuse to approach law enforcement authorities. The Central Committee further expressed support for all the ministers who started legal action against Tuja Capital CEO for defamation, amongst others. In the same vein, the SACP support the ANC Secretary General's action to lay charges against the said CEO. On the local government presentation, the SACP expressed deep concern about the austerity and its impact on the performance of local government, especially on infrastructure development and delivery of basic services. In the coming period, we will intensify our campaign to roll back austerity and tackle irregular conduct and corruption in municipalities to improve service delivery performances. The Central Committee reiterated on the issue of rent manipulation. We reiterated our stance, indicating that individuals directly involved in manipulating our currency pair or exchange rate with other currencies must be held personally liable. They must be charged with corruption. While fining the banks and other traders is important, the fines are too low, mostly at 10% of their annual turnover, and must be increased. Moreover, alone, the fines are not enough to deter the manipulation of our currency, given the astronomical profits that the implicated banks control. The SACP therefore calls for new legislative measures to clamp down on the manipulation of our currency. The Reserve Bank must consider amending foreign exchange trading licenses for guilty parties to allow only provision of basic foreign exchange facilities to clients, but prohibiting entities from trading for own account. Let us recall in April 2015, the Competition Commission initiated a rand manipulation complaint, which it updated in August 2016, in total including 28 foreign-controlled multinational and domestic commercial banks. It is possible that there was further rand manipulation outside the 6 years. This must be investigated as well. On halting the erosion of our national industrial base and defending workers' livelihoods, the SACP is deeply concerned by and denounces this week's announcement by ArcelorMittal. The Luxembourg-based multinational corporation said it intends to close its Newcastle long steel manufacturing plant and the Vereeniging plant, where workers produce steel used in sectors such as construction, mining, and others. If it closes the plant, ArcelorMittal will destroy domestic productive capacity for high-grade specialty steel used in advanced industries such as automotive manufacturing. ArcelorMittal's intention to close the plant will have a wider impact downstream, where it will force some enterprises to close and others to turn to steel importation. Still, those who will turn to steel importation will experience logistics-related lead time delays and costs, and this will have a negative impact as well. The entire scenario will contribute to deindustrialization and could culminate in additional retrenchments beyond the 3,500 workers estimated in the media coverage. ArcelorMittal's intention is a stark reminder of the human cost associated with profit-driven neoliberal state, corporate restructuring, and deindustrialization. The Central Committee called for urgent, decisive state interventions to stop the closure of the Newcastle long steel plant and the Vereeniging plant. As a matter of principle, before any enterprise can contemplate a decision of such a magnitude that ArcelorMittal's intention bears, there must be direct engagement for state intervention. There must be meaningful consultation with trade unions representing workers. Other stakeholders likely to be affected both downstream and in the surrounding areas must also be consulted meaningfully. Continuity of production at the Newcastle long steel plant and the Vereeniging plant must not hinge on its ownership by ArcelorMittal. Therefore, state intervention should include possible transfer of ownership or direct takeover of the plant from ArcelorMittal to ensure the continuity of production as opposed to allowing ArcelorMittal to close it. Furthermore, state intervention must include immediate measures to address the undercapacity crisis and disruptions affecting rail, port, and electricity generation operations. The crisis affecting this infrastructure impacts the wider economy and employment creation. Also, there must be decisive actions against theft, looting, and vandalism of public network infrastructure and materials as well as components. The criminality amounts to economic sabotage and must be treated and punished as such. On the wider working class unity to roll back neoliberalism, going to the root of ArcelorMittal's scenario, we just want to indicate that what was once a state-owned ISCO since 1928, it's now called ArcelorMittal. This has resulted from ISCO's privatization in 1989 by the apartheid regime after adopting neoliberalism in the 1970s. Along with the subsequent foreign acquisition and mergers, ISCO's privatization marked the beginning of the distressing journey that forced our nation's industrial capacity to succumb to foreign control and private profit-driven interest. Likewise, the full takeover of Saldanha Steel Mill in 2002, developed through a joint venture with a public entity, the Industrial Development Corporation, which paved the way for ArcelorMittal to determine the future of our domestic steel manufacturing industrial landscape with far-reaching implications. The developing situation reflects the failure of both privatization and other neoliberal policies adopted during and after apartheid. The global context in which neoliberal forces push privatization, affecting state-owned enterprises such as ISCO, was and still is characterized by capitalist competition for dominance and monopoly. This is a characteristic feature of imperialism. Foreign-controlled multinational corporations such as ArcelorMittal have multiple manufacturing factories in different global regions. Others have overcapacity.
All right, those are live visuals from Bloemfontein at the SACP's briefing post the party's central plenary. Mapaila there, touching on a number of issues, among them being the rand manipulation. You would have heard he says there that executives who participated in that manipulation must be charged. He also went on to suggest the amendment of the foreign exchange trading licenses for those found guilty. We have a reporter on the field for us who will continue to monitor that particular briefing and just give us a summation of everything stated there. Now, for a look at the week ahead on the international front, we're now bringing our international editor, Sophie Mukwena, who's at the COP28 summit for us. Good afternoon, Sophie. Negotiations, we believe, have started, and the issue of global stocktake is the focus of the conference. What main issues in relation to stocktake have come out thus far?
Well, I think this is quite important. I heard earlier on that when the General Secretary of the South African Communist Party, Solima Paila, was talking just now, he was talking about Eskom and the privatization of SOEs. And you know that we have had challenges in relation to the introduction of policies that are related to renewables, and therefore they do have results that perhaps were not anticipated. That would speak to issues such as the decommissioning of the Komati power station in Mpumalanga. Earlier on, the minister related a very, very sad story, Minister Barbara Creasy, in terms of what has since happened since the decommissioning of the Komati power station, talking about how ordinary women, particularly small business, were affected, and that there was no proper consultation because it was during COVID-19, and the World Bank, when it was doing that research and the decommissioning of Komati, no proper consultation was done, particularly with ordinary communities. Yes, the workers were transferred to other plants and they continue to work because they do have skills, but ordinary people and business, and when you look at the value chain, were affected. And therefore she spoke about the fact that women in particular are now experiencing challenges of gender-based violence because you know that masculinity play itself when people are vulnerable or perhaps when they are frustrated. And therefore, these are some of the issues that are also related to stock taking. You have to look at, since the introduction of the agreements in relation to climate change, what has the world achieved and what are the benefits and perhaps the negative implications thereof. And Komati, a case in point, these are the issues that they are discussing, so that in future when you introduce these renewables, you are able to ensure that you don't have challenges thereafter.
Very important issues being discussed there, particularly the just and equitable transition for the underdeveloped nations. But it wasn't all bad, I suppose, because the start was quite great. We had the signing there of the operationalization of the Loss and Damage Fund. That particular one was a big one for many, even the UN Secretary General going to commend some of these nations for the pledges made.
Yes, of course, the Loss and Damage Fund, the agreement that now it must be started, and the United Arab Emirates putting money as the host nation and the current president of COP. And therefore now we expect more countries to do the same, but you know, the two big ones, that is the United States of America did pledge $40 million, but we are still to hear from China and others. And therefore, yes, the agreement, and it was on the first day of the summit, which is very progressive. But the reality is this is just not enough. On the other hand, you have people who are also talking about issues that are related to agriculture. People saying attention must be paid to agricultural impact, particularly when you look at climate change due to the droughts or due to the floods. Let's take a listen at one of the most prominent people in India had to say about agriculture.
For decades we've been just talking about machines and automobiles and factories. We're now trying to move the narrative towards soil, agriculture and people. Fortunately, in this COP28, the direction has shifted. Significant focus has come to agriculture and soils, and without agriculture and soil, whatever the arena of your work, without eating food, you're not going to go anywhere. So fortunately, nearly 50% of the attention has shifted towards agriculture, and right now the UAE government has made the agricultural declaration, which is very significant, and the Indian government has come out with what is called as green credits. That is, agriculture and farmers can actually access the carbon credit scheme. These are very significant steps. Hope we take this forward in a big way.
Thank you very much to our international editor there, who was in conversation with a very, very prominent guru there. She's currently at COP28 monitoring as that summit continues. And that's where we leave it for today. More news on the other side of this break. Now that the snake season in South Africa has arrived, concerns about anti-venom supplies have been eased. Although there had previously been problems with anti-venom provision nationwide, many hospitals now have supplies. SABC News reporter Kagiso Keipopele and video journalist Jabulani wa Africa file this report for us.
Bitten by a snake here in this taxi rank, Ephraim Wenda tried to remove it from a taxi and was bitten in the process of killing the snake. He spent months in hospital and is still suffering from the after effects.
I saw a snake in the taxi and I took it out, trying to kill it. When I thought it was finally dead, it took me by surprise and bit me. I went to hospital. They asked me what happened and they checked my finger. I told them I was bitten by a snake and they asked what kind of a snake, and I couldn't tell them what kind of snake because I didn't know. I stayed in hospital for 6 months.
The locals say they lack sufficient knowledge about what to do in the event of a snake bite.
I think it's very important to educate people about snakes. Snakes are very poisonous. I saw it when another man bitten by a snake here at the rink, but I blame him because he was killing that snake too. Because he was killing that snake.
If I can be bitten by a snake, the first thing I will do is tie the affected area, and after I rush to the hospital.
Locally, antivenom is produced by the South African Vaccine Producers, a subsidiary of the National Health Laboratory Services. Earlier this year, they were unable to produce enough polyvalent snake antivenom, which is used to treat bites from, among others, black mamba, green mamba, and Cape cobra. Veterinarians especially struggle to get antivenom. The National Health Department, however, say they currently have sufficient supply.
Although there's a shortage of snake bite antivenom around the world, the Department of Health is able to meet the demand using the current stock levels of antivenom. Therefore, we urge that all victims of snake bite should be rushed to the nearest hospital for medical attention.
A local ecologist and trained snake catcher from Northwest Parks Board say their call-outs are increasing.
Mafikeng area and the surroundings, greater Mafikeng area. The most calls that we receive, or I receive so far, is boom slang. Even 2 days earlier, I caught a boom slang just at the residence here at Rivera Park. I caught a boom slang also at the school at Rooigrond. And the other snake that is common here is a snouted cobra. It's a type of cobra. And both snakes are very venomous or highly venomous and dangerous. And then we also get calls for puff adders. Puff adders are also very dangerous, very venomous. And there's big snakes like...
And that's my lot for today. We're back next weekend. Take care.